Praying today, I discovered something very unusual that I thought that I had to share with y'all. The names in Biden's cabinet are prophesying judgment, not metaphorically. It's literal. It's literally prophesying judgment. From false prophet to dark streams, their names spell out a dire warning to America. Unbelievable. But Trump's team, that tells a completely different story. These names aren't just labels, they're divine blueprints. So stick around. This prophecy will blow your mind and change how you look at politics from a biblical lens forever. A while ago in prayer, the Lord shared with me that you can take the names of people and replace their names with the meaning of their names, and you get understanding of what was going on in that time and what a person was called to. I actually recently, like a year or two ago, saw a lesson by Chuck Missler where he was teaching. And by the way, the irony is not lost on me that his name was Chuck, as in throw, and Missler. And he worked in a weapons defense program where he made programs or did whatever he did working on missiles and stuff. So literally throwing missiles, Chuck Missler. So I think it's kind of funny that I did actually learn a little bit of this. Actually, I learned it from John Paul Jackson, but I learned a little bit from Chuck Missler as well. And what I'm going to share is what Chuck Missler shared when he pointed out the names of Adam all the way to Noah, through the Seth line back all the way to Adam, and that there was a prophecy in the gospel here. So we have Adam, which means man, Seth, which means appointed, Enosh, which means mortal or frailty, Kenan, which means sorrow, Mahalalel, which means the blessed God, and then Jared, which means shall come down, or descendant, as in descending down, also descendants as in family members, heirs, etc. Enoch, which means teaching or dedicated, Methuselah, which means his death shall bring, Lamech, which means despairing, and Noah, rest or comfort. So when we put these all together, what we see here is a statement. You want to say it? I'm going to say it's a sentence, but it's really 4 lines. Kind of looks like a paragraph, but it's one sentence. It says, man is appointed mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down, teaching, his death shall bring the despairing rest. And that's just preaching the gospel. The fall of Adam comes. We have the human condition, the sin condition. God comes as Jesus, taking on the flesh, and then he becomes a rabbi. He teaches us, and his death brings us, those of us who are mourning, who are repenting, rest. It brings us into his kingdom. It brings us salvation. And we couldn't enter into that rest without him. Jesus is our rest. He's our shalom. He's our Shabbat. He's everything. Even Methuselah's name means his death shall bring. That was prophesying of what was going on in that time. Something was going to happen. His death's going to bring what? Noah. His death will bring rest. His name meant his death will bring, and then his son meant rest. Well, the Lord said the reason that we can do this is because he takes and picks all of the names for people, regardless of how crazy or silly or stupid it sounds. He has a name for each person. So he picks the names of the leaders when they're appointed. And you take a look at their cabinets, and what you'll see is in their definitions of their names, you will figure out that it is a prophetic message to us of things that could happen. They could be blessings or they could be cursings, right? Now, these names aren't random. They're divinely inspired, revealing God's redemptive plan from the very beginning when things start. And I could probably go back and do this for years, and we could see how incredibly accurate this is. But I'm just going to do the last 6 years, okay? With every positive connotation of a name, definition, a word, there's also a negative connotation. That means that there's a positive meaning and a bad meaning, which depends on the context used. So when we look at Joe Biden, you could say I'm being biased because I'm a conservative Republican, but I want to be fair and say he had the potential to do something great. He had the potential to be the Joseph that led us out of famine and into increase. So that was a moment of choice. But let's take a look at his top 15. So we're going to go with, I think it's actually top 16 or 17. We're going to go with Kamala, which means lotus, purity, or spiritual. Now, in a negative connotation, it represents impurity, darkness, or the divine feminine. And you know that she practices New Age. So the divine feminine, they're all about the divine feminine. You've probably heard it millions of times. That's what the lotus represents when you see it. Okay. Antony, meaning priceless or praiseworthy. The opposite of that would be not worthy of praise or worthless. Janet means God is gracious or the gift of God. It can also mean there's no gift from God or no grace. Lloyd means gray-haired, which can mean wisdom or, in a negative context, foolishness. Merrick, as in Merrick Garland, can be famous ruler or power of fame. The opposite of that would be infamous ruler. Deborah, which is a B, which is prophetic, represents the false prophetic in a negative connotation. Thomas, which means twin, usurper. It represents duality or double-mindedness. Okay. Gina represents queenly or a farmer, depending on the root of the word. It can mean hunter or consumer in a negative context. Now, hunting I don't typically consider to be negative, but it can be a negative thing. It can represent a predatory spirit even. We have Pete, which represents a rock. Xavier, which represents the new house or bright old, and that can represent old family or a dark family. Or Xavier, which can be a dark house. So instead of the white house, it's the dark house. Pete, which is the rock, which can be a stumbling stone, pebble, or represent hardness of heart. Jennifer, which means fair, white, or smooth, which can mean beauty or light, dark and ugly. Miguel, who is like God. Dennis, follower of the divine. Divine what? Alejandro, defender of men. Opposite of that, doesn't defend or protect. Avril, April, essentially. To open or new beginnings. Incidentally, the number 8 is the number for witchcraft, and it's the number of new beginnings. It also represents entering into the supernatural by being completely and fully satiated to overflow. William represents resolute protector. Opposite, will not protect. Catherine, pure and defiled. Linda, beautiful or ugly. Cecilia, blind or inner vision. Jared, descended or came down, like we already talked about. Isabel, God is my oath, or God is my promise, or broken oaths and broken promises. And Arati, which means worshipped or blazing light, which can represent false worship or darkness. Now, we're going to take these down. I'm going to break them into groupings of 1, 2, 3, 5. Groupings of 5. Yeah, we're going to break them down into groupings of 5 and look at what this means. Okay, Kamala, Antony, Janet, Lloyd, and Merrick. An impure spirit rises where once there was purity. A worthless ruler praised by fools. Grace has departed, and wisdom has turned to folly. The name that should have brought glory is now infamous and drenched in shame. Sentence 2. This is Deborah, Tom, Gina, Xavier, and Pete. The false prophetess speaks sweet lies with a double mind. She hunts instead of nurtures and dwells in the ruins of an old dark house. What should have been a rock has become a stumbling stone, a heart hardened against truth. Next, we have Jennifer, Miguel, Dennis, Alejandro, and Avril. Beauty has turned to shadow, and the cry, who is like God, is now used in mockery. The follower of joy has embraced despair. The one who should defend has left men exposed, and instead of a new beginning, a door of witchcraft has been opened. And then last but not least, we have William, Catherine, Linda, Cecilia, Jared, and Arati. The protector stands silent. Purity has been defiled. What was once beautiful is now disfigured. The blind lead the blind with counterfeit vision. The humbled have descended into rebellion, and false light is worshipped in the shadows. That whole thing right there is a prophecy of what was going on in the time of Joe Biden's reign as the commander-in-chief, right? So now let me read it without the names and just read it to you. You tell me if this sounds like a prophetic word this is from 2020 until 2024, okay? An impure spirit. Tell me if this sounds like it's talking about Joe Biden's presidency. An impure spirit rises where once there was purity, and a worthless ruler praised by fools. Grace has departed, and wisdom has turned to folly. The name that should have brought glory is now infamous and drenched in shame. The false prophetess speaks sweet lies with a double mind. She hunts instead of nurtures and dwells in the ruins of an old dark house. What should have been a rock has become a stumbling stone, a heart hardened against truth. Beauty has turned to shadow, and the cry, who is like God, is now used in mockery. The follower of joy has embraced despair. The one who should defend has left men exposed, and instead of a new beginning, a door of witchcraft has been opened. The protector stands silent. purity has been defiled. What was once beautiful is now disfigured. The blind lead the blind with counterfeit vision. The humble have descended into rebellion, and false light is worshipped in the shadows. Let me tell you something. Do you know what COVID means in Latin? If you were to take the two words co and then co-vid, COVID means to see or along with vision. And what was this that just said? The blind lead the blind in counterfeit vision. I don't even have to say what COVID was. I'm not going to make any jokes or anything like that. But with vision, that is not a coincidence. Did that give you goosebumps right now? Because it did me. Well, let's take a look at Trump's, and we're going to look at this in a positive connotation because he's doing positive things for America. It's like Kevin Zadai said, if the leader of your country is not leading people to freedom, then that's not from God. If they're not bringing greater freedom to the people, that's not what God has planned, right? So we need to really pay attention to that. So let's look at from Donald all the way down to his top, I want to say it's 17. So 16 cabinet members. If we want to include Pete Hegseth, we're going to do 17 names altogether. Donald, world ruler. Pete, the Rock. Marco, warlike. Pam, all honey, sweetness. Doug, dark stream. Robert, bright fame. Doug, dark water or dark stream. Christy, Christ. Sean, God is gracious. Chris, bearer of Christ. Howard, Braveheart. Linda, beautiful. Scott, Scotland. From Scott. Greek means from darkness. Lori, sweet victory. Scott, from darkness or dark river. Brooke, a small stream. So let's take and break that down the same way we did with the last one. Donald, Pete, Marco, Pam, and Doug. World ruler, the Rock, warlike, all honey, sweetness, dark stream. A world ruler will rise upon the Rock. Though warlike at heart, sweetness will be on his lips, yet a dark stream flows beneath. Robert, Doug, Christy, Sean, and Chris. Bright fame, dark water, Christ, God is gracious, bearer of Christ. Bright fame will rise even as dark waters stir. Dark waters, does that sound like the swamp? But Christ will shine through, for God is gracious to the bearer of Christ. And then the last group is Howard, Linda, Scott, Lori, Brooke. Brave heart, beautiful from darkness, sweet victory, small stream. With a brave heart and beauty unshaken, sweet victory will emerge from the darkness like a small but mighty stream. Okay, now let's read that prophetic word without the extra stuff in the middle here and see what it says. Let me just delete a couple of these real quick here so I can read them without getting distracted. A world ruler will rise upon the Rock. Though he is warlike at heart, sweetness will be on his lips. Yet a dark stream flows beneath. Bright fame will rise, even as dark waters or the swamp stirs. But Christ will shine through, for God is gracious to the bearer of Christ. With a brave heart and beauty unshaken, sweet victory will emerge from the darkness like a small but mighty stream. That is something that I want to see as saying. So remember, we're looking at this from a positive context, positive connotation. And that is that God is promising us through these people, because they're doing what God wants them to do. He's promising us through them that he's going to do stuff. And look, this really prophesies and outlines what's even going on right now. He's a world ruler who's risen upon the Rock. He prays. He believes in Jesus. He really gave his life to Jesus after the assassination attempt. Though he's warlike at heart, he's dealing with a lot of war, but he's not afraid to go in and do the nitty gritty and stop people from taking advantage of Americans. Sweetness will be on his lips. So he's a good speaker, easy to listen to, but he can be harsh. But there is a dark stream that flows beneath. So he has a dark side. He can dip into some spirits that aren't necessarily the great thing, or there are some dark things in his cabinet that are going to be exposed. There's a stream of darkness that's going to be exposed. And bright fame will rise, even as those dark waters stir. Christ will shine through, for God is gracious to the bearer of Christ. The bearer of Christ is anyone who's a Christian. Pete Hegseth is a Christian. Trump is a Christian. Marco Rubio is a Christian. So we see this. God's going to have grace for them in this time. With a brave heart and beauty unshaken, sweet victory will emerge. So we're going to see Trump be victorious. And from the darkness, like victory will emerge from the darkness like a small but mighty stream. So all that darkness that he's dealing with, we're going to see victory come through like a small but mighty stream, which means it's going to be very powerful. Light in the darkness looks so bright, and especially in a dark world that he's living in. Well, guys, that's all that I have for today's lesson, okay? Love you guys. Be blessed, and I'll see you again real soon. Until next time, bye.